Well, patch 9.2.5 is here, and while we knew things were coming in it, the encryption meant we had no idea about the specifics. So yes, there would be something in Tirisfal. Details? We had none of them. So today, I'm here to break down the three major plot beats, talk about what they mean for the game. Actually, quite exciting. So, the future of Anduin and Sylvanas, the future of the Night Elves, and all of what the new Tirisfal quest stuff means, especially for the Forsaken. In addition to things like us getting the Darkfallen customization option for Elves, and the Dark Ranger gear for Hunters. And also, seriously, I have been very critical about aspects of this game's story lately. But I really do have to say here, you have to give credit where it's due. The quality on display today is so much greater than what we've seen lately, and it actually does give me a bit of hope for the future. And it feels really bloody good to say that. Really good. And also, it's June, welcome to June, and that means monks and dragons. Okay, get a load of this art. Man, that team is so strong. And that dragon? Well, here it is in pin form for you to get. So if you are subbed, and of course the monk card as well. So if you're subbed through June, that's what you're going to get. Also, we have made massive strides in logistics. There are now many hundreds of things leaving our fulfillment center per month, and we are getting back in the backlog. So I'll talk more about that at the end. All right, let's break down this lore. Well then, Night Elves, you might get a tree back. It's going to take a while, and it's absolutely going to be a plot thread in Dragonflight. Now, more than the other two quest lines, this one is really setting up the next expansion. So, Tyrande, Chandris, and Ysera meet with the Winter Queen, and something rather big happens. So, Tyrande, now firmly out of that Night Warrior plotline, thankfully, is gifted a tear, one that will become a vessel of renewal to which the souls of the Night Elves, who are the victims of Teldrassil, have chosen to become a part of. The quote is, to become a part of a new beginning for their kin. And that really tells us what we need to know. This seed, which we're told embodies the cycle of death and life, is the Night Elves' future. Now, in the conversation that happens after the cutscene, we learn how this may actually lead into the next expansion. So this seed is touched by the Emerald Dream and by Ardenweald. So the death and, life, aspects. And there's balance in that. Now, the thing there is that while Teldrassil, captured our imaginations as kids, Teldrassil had a big problem. It wasn't blessed. Whole big story there with Fandral Staghelm, but it wasn't blessed. And that is part of why it always struggled with corruption. Now, while this is no doubt a different blessing, I imagine it will serve the same function. And that means that wherever this takes root, that's where the Night Elves' new home is probably going to be, and it will be a more stable and true home that is free from corruption, unlike Teldrassil. Ysera says that she knows of a place where it may be protected. Apparently one that Marithra, her daughter, will know of as well. So until that seed can be planted, it's going to go to the green dragons kept safe. Ysera cannot return to our world, to the mortal plane, without great sacrifice. For in the Winter Queen sacrificing her essence to save Ysera's wild seed, Ysera's soul is bound to Ardenweald, so she cannot leave. But in parting, she does say that should Elune allow it, she will soar through Azeroth's skies again. That actually is setting up a proper return for Ysera. Now, that's kind of interesting. Would that then be because her soul is bound by the Winter Queen's essence being sacrificed? Would that then mean a sacrifice from Elune? Perhaps. But either way, we know that Dragonflight is going to involve Tyrande, Elune, and the Green Dragons as one of its plot threads. We now know it's also going to involve this seed, one that I presume could regrow into their home. Now, the potentially odd part of this is the Night Elves lending their souls to the seed. The Winter Queen had offered them a place in Ardenweald, but they chose this. They chose the seed. Now, broadly, it can go two ways. One, they've willingly sacrificed their afterlife for the betterment of their people, and that's their essence gone, used. Option two, which I think would be quite in line with the whole balance of life and death, is that, yes, their souls are going to be within this seed, but perhaps they will return to the forest as wisps, which is, of course, the fate of many Night Elf souls, has been for thousands of years. They could absolutely make that work. I think imagine a big cinematic, the wisps, all of that. It could make for a really great scene, and I very much do hope the latter is the case there, and that the victims of Teldrassil don't just kind of sacrifice themselves to be seed fuel. Okay, regardless though, that is a major Dragonflight plot line established, one that I think gives Night Elf players a bit of hope that the faction that they really like is going to have a stable home again. And also, this is Blizzard giving us a seamless expansion to expansion transition, at least for this storyline. Now, I do have a question. Where is this seed going to be planted? I mean, the ash of Teldrassil is extremely nutrient dense, assuming it's anything close to what a forest fire does to soil on planet Earth, so perhaps it could just be a very sensible place to replant. Or maybe it'll go somewhere entirely different. But I think this is also a symbolic narrative decision from Blizzard, because repairing Teldrassil, that would directly undo the damage of one of their most controversial narrative decisions ever. I mean, not undo the damage, because obviously we've dealt with that for years and it hasn't really been a really great time, but I think symbolically you understand what I mean. So, let's talk about Anduin and Sylvanas. First, this scene represents something. For the longest time, important bits of lore have existed in novels, or people have had to look up guides for them, or Reddit posts, or YouTube videos. But this scene takes place immediately after the Sylvanas novel. It's not a scene from the novel or anything, and it's done in such a way that you don't need to have read the novel for this scene. Yes, the Sylvanas novel absolutely fleshes her character out massively, and I do believe the novel is essentially Blizzard performing a repair job on Sylvanas' motivations, but the point is that this scene is core to moving the characters forward, and that we have an epilogue patch has meant that there's a seamless in-game narrative experience for these characters. So basically, it's damn good to see a proper epilogue. And the Anduin work here is just bloody excellent. Seriously, this is a great cutscene. His friends have saved him. They think he's fine. You know? You were mind-controlled. It's not your fault. For him, essentially, it's all blending together. Yeah, he was mind-controlled, but he had an emotional experience while that happened, and that was his. The horror was exhilarating, in a way, in a twisted way, that he's now worried about. His mind was controlled, but it still had a degree of inner experience. I mean, anyone would be turned about after what Anduin went through. But what Blizzard are really getting at here is a natural evolution of Anduin into his own man. And this is what I really like. For the longest time, it's like I liked what Anduin sort of stood for, but I wanted to see more development to him. And I started to become sick of Anduin just being, I am the moral arbiter. You know? And in the past, Anduin, I think this is some great work, he was defined more initially as the counter to his father. Instead of the warrior, he was the diplomat, the peacemaker, the optimist. And that's how Anduin partially dealt with the tension that the two of them shared, because it at times was a strange relationship. Obviously, a lot of things got better, but he had issues. But now, Anduin is realizing that between his strange childhood situation and then his responsibilities as king, he's really realizing that he's been molded. Perhaps not into something that's him. Molded initially into being the counterweight to his father, because that's how he could basically deal with himself in the world, then molded into the duty of king. But Anduin is not water, helpless to do anything but take the shape of whatever contains him. That's not who he is, he's a man. Sylvanas realizes this. He doesn't know if he is who he thought he was. And he's wondering, he thought, was he really who he thought he was? He's just starting to realize, oh, there's a lot more going on with me. And that's what a life like his has just always had bubbling up underneath the surface, and now we're actually seeing it. And now he's wondering, well, if he calls in the light, is it going to answer? That he can't have his kingdom believe in him anymore? He can't be sure of his own actions when he even doubts who he is. He feels trapped by this. Of course, Sylvanas feels, pokes a little bit of fun. Anduin feels like, well, he has no choice. He has to be king. Well, she just brings up what he had said already about free will. And so Anduin essentially muses on the idea of taking a break, that he needs to think. He needs to untangle everything. And there's a lot wrapped up in this, actually, because in Shadows Rising, we see Anduin use a flicker of void, showing the capacity for shadow within him, obviously a contrast to his holy priest portrayal. And beyond mechanics, that represents, well, experiences waking more sides of him up. Him growing, becoming his own man, free from his childhood and his responsibilities. And as for Sylvanas, well, I really think this is the best way that they could have portrayed her. Now, the novel's work on Sylvanas is absolutely brilliant, but that's obviously all for nothing if we don't see it in game. And here, I think we really see Sylvanas in a good light. She's accepted what has happened, she has accepted what she has done, and now she understands that with all of that being in her head, now it's time for the work. She accepts and agrees with her fate. And these few lines of dialogue, they do so much to flesh out a character that has been serially underdeveloped in-game, to the point where they needed to basically have a book fix the problem for them. As for the future, Anduin has to sort himself out. In the meantime, Tyrande is going to continue to rule as regent in his stead, and I don't really expect major faction moves from him during the Dragonflight expansion. There is, however, this line.
Farewell, Sylvanas Windrunner. Until our paths cross again.
Farewell, little lion.
And you know what? I don't think, if you'd have told me, just given me that line in a shred of data mining as an example, I kind of would have thought, I don't know if that'll work. But in this scene, it really worked. I was kind of surprised that it worked, but it really did. And look, I do not at all like how we got here, but I think this is absolutely the best way that they could have ended it. If Sylvanas' story had have been told in-game, if Sylvanas' story as told in the book was actually told in-game for all of these years, and if Zovaal had have actually landed as a villain, then this as a finisher would have really been something for a scene. Unfortunately, this scene is somewhat robbed of that weight because of how we got here, but at least when faced with delivering the final beat in these characters' relationship for now, they did as fantastic a job as they could given the circumstances. Also, Farewell Little Lion also works. It's a bit of a thing from the book, though. Kind of would have been nice if that was a little bit more fleshed out in the game, but as a parting line, I actually think it really does land for the people who are the most invested in this. So hopefully, the inclusion of this scene highlights that Blizzard has an intent to do better in this regard in the future. And with this scene and the Tyrande one, we are seeing them have true epilogue content. Less of a War Crimes-like situation where it's like, oh yeah, you need to read that book to understand the time travel that sets up the next expansion. And I'm happy to see that. Finally for today, The Forsaken. And this was quite the quest line. I was kind of worried that it could just end up being a, teleport over there, talk to a character, play a cutscene, job's a good one. No, it's quite the quest line. It didn't feel like it had any filler in it. And, having something like this, in its actual content, be wholly unknown before patch day was just fantastic. I actually felt like there was just being online on Twitter, even from a lot of the people who are generally very critical, there was more of an aura of like, oh shit, this is really good. And that just felt really good, to experience, to see that again in the community. So this is all about the Forsaken working out just who the hell they are in a post-Sylvanas world. And I think many players would be worried that they'd become really soft and they'd lose the flavor, the texture that make the Forsaken cool. They have to have that edge. All of those, personality traits that sort of change when somebody is risen up in the way that they were. And Blizzard did a fantastic job here, especially given the potential for Kalia to not land. But no, here the Forsaken act like the Forsaken. Belmont still has his edge. He is right suspicious of Kalia fitting in, and it actually works. And then, they actually do make Kalia fit in, ending with a Horde-only cinematic between Lillian and Kalia. Kind of unfortunate. Alliance players are just going to get that one on YouTube, but it is what it is. It's a great little quest line, though. As is the one for the Blood Elves, from what I understand. I just can't do it yet because my Blood Elf is currently level 50, not 60. But look, if these quest lines, which, this one is just great. Like, it didn't just feel like a, spam through everything, do it super quick. No, it actually had like a really nice pace to it. It was a great quest line. And if these are any way indicative of the sorts of things we could be getting in the future, then that is fantastic news. I'll say too, it certainly helped that I was using the add-on called Immersion in this. It just presents that quest dialogue in a way that is so much more palatable, and it makes it feel more like dialogue. I think that really helps in how we experience it. Here, Blizzard have successfully threaded the needle as best they could. They've restored the Forsaken home city, which feels great for them, I'm sure. And in a final revelation, one of the first of the new Desolate Council's moves is to formally withdraw from Gilneas. Meaning we finally have a happy Gen. Can you believe it? Gen got to be happy for a bit. That's nice. Now I'm sort of left wondering if that's actually going to be represented in-game at any point, but still. This questline actually delivers a brilliant slice of just Warcraft story. And you know what? Even when it dips into Shadowlands for a brief little jaunt to Maldraxxus, it makes sense and it still feels good. So there you go. It's just nice going back home, isn't it? Another nice touch is that the Hunter Dark Ranger ensemble, that is purchased after this questline from the Hunter Order Hall. Now, that's not a really big deal, but they did just use the Hunter Order Hall again. Is that Blizzard kind of recognizing that these Order Halls are places that exist in the world instead of just being a Legion feature? Okay, one or two quick little things that I think are super important. So number one, these cutscenes all take place in-game, right? Now, the actual lip sync and stuff, that's still, that has to be hand animated. So that's a lot of work. I know there is auto lip sync with, mouth shapes for words, but especially when you're bringing in the facial expressions and all of that, that's actually a lot of manual work. So they did put a lot of work into these, but I still have to presume that these are significantly more production friendly than the pre-rendered cinematics. Now, I don't mean the sort of more photoreal ones. I mean the ones like the same style as the Zoval Death cinematic or as the the Broken Shore one, right? Because those are a very different pipeline. So for these, they're great. These are in-game cutscenes with characters having emotions and great lip sync. That is a massive win for Blizzard's ability to actually tell their story in-game. They can totally go and punctuate major moments and actually have the acting of the characters also be portrayed by the characters themselves, not just the actors. And that really was fantastic in, that Anduin Sylvanas scene. Both of them give such a fantastic performance there. And that scene, because sometimes dialogue can feel quite clunky, and it's this isn't how people would talk. That scene felt way more believable, which I really liked. Their performances were great. And the way the characters were animated, actually really helped to sell and to deliver those performances. So I was very happy about that, and I think that's just great news for the future. And then look, just finally, man, encryption. What a win! What a win! We had no idea of any of this. See, in the past, all of these cutscenes, the script would just be there. Know about it weeks in advance. It could be taken out of context. There could have been, confusions with it. But no. All of the dialogue and quest text from the quest line in Tirisfal. We could have just known about it. Imagine in Final Fantasy XIV if people knew the MSQ. They knew the big new storyline before the damn patch even came out. Then the community wouldn't experience the story moving forward together. So this is just fundamentally great for the game. I saw a surprising amount of excitement for this patch, especially considering that it's not a massive patch. There's plenty of excitement out there. People wanted to know what was happening next in Azeroth, and it really helped that when they actually got to see it, number one, they saw it as intended in-game. Number two, unlike, the likes of that really Soval and cinematic, it was actually great. It was actually great. So, pretty damn good for the future, eh? I'm excited. Yeah, no, this, look, like, if 925 came out and we saw clunky dialogue and lore that's a misfire, I mean, especially for the Forsaken players, they were so worried Kalia would become queen and replace Sylvanas, and that the Forsaken tone would be changed and softened, and they wouldn't feel like the Forsaken anymore. There's just points where it actually feels like they have listened to community criticism and actually acted on it in the story. And that's great. Like, if we're going in this direction in future, then, I mean, that makes me really happy to be into the lore. So I just think this is fantastic. Fantastic news for the game. Yeah. So there you go. Now, I did promise I'd talk a little bit more about the logistical side of things over for Patreon and loot and stuff like that. Essentially, we had issues. Things kind of ran aground towards the end of last year. We then shifted over to using, sort of doing the whole thing with Fulfillment Center. So, the pins come here. I QC all of them, which takes quite a while. And then I post them over to the Fulfillment Center. And when all the orders come through, I then compile a big thing. I send it over. And you would have thought that would be really simple. Turns out lots of things like having data validation be correct between the CSV output of Patreon and then what works for the fulfillment center with the shipping companies, and so many nightmares that, you don't know what you don't know. But anyway, I've since developed a great system that automates a whole bunch of this data validation, and it's annoying stuff like, US doesn't accept that. It has to be United States. Some things are exactly the ISOs, like the proper ISO formatting and name for a country. Others are different. For some reason, Northwestern Territory in Canada is just literally not accepted, even though, Ontario is. So many edge cases and weird things, even down to, different things, like either supporting or not supporting UTF-8, which led to a few other issues as well. Especially when, we have sort of different characters being used. So the way that things are now is, and then also, of course, a lot of lockdowns were happening, in where the pins are made, which, again, has slowed down those arriving. So it's kind of been a bit of a cacophony of disasters. But finally, everything's actually set up. So, yeah, I think, within the last, week and a half, 800 things have been sent out. So, yes, we've kind of hit the point where we kind of just go boom, 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 boom. Right now, the only limiting factor is just pin production because of, lockdowns and stuff. So those are going to be literally as fast as is humanly possible. But we have the whole system now, and we're basically ordering some of the pins month to month so that we get them absolutely as quickly as possible. And once we have enough time ahead, I'm just going to do a massive bulk order of 5 months of pins, which means we're 100% golden literally from now onward. So that is the update on that and what's been going on. Okay, that's it for me. Of course, you know, Monk Month. Got some real kick-ass dragons. I love this dragon pin so much. So that's what's on the Patreon this month. Okay, let me know what you thought about the story stuff, and I'll catch you next time.